with Dawn, and I am so excited to welcome back JoDee Neil,
Yes.
attorney and author. She mentioned, I think it was like almost a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So much has been going on. So no pressure, but update us. What are you doing?
Okay, well, since we last spoke, where I was chief of crimes against children in a district attorney's office in, sort of rural Texas, I said, well, I'm not that anymore. I started my own law firm. Thank you. I have 3 websites: my law firm website, my JoDeeNeil.com website, and then the website for my book, which I have written since we met last. Let's see, I sold both my houses and moved, and it has been a wild ride.
All right,
Small changes.
Yeah, small changes.
Yeah.
Talk about tumbling over the apple cart and just
Exactly. Go
starting
big or
all
go
fresh.
home.
Exactly. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, let's talk about the book, because when is it coming out? What is it about? I know it's your passion.
Yeah.
I want to hear it from you.
Man, the book has been the greatest journey of, probably my life, aside from being a mom. It's been available for pre-order since November, and it is shipping on April the 7th.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes. My book is called Outcry Witness. It's a former prosecutor's guide to healing and justice after sexual violence. It is, 214 pages. It is, you can slip it in a tote bag, slip it in your jacket, read it on a plane in the airport, real quiet. And it is the first book of its kind. It's the first book ever, really, that's addressed a person who has survived a crime that's taken place on their body and is still in a state of being frozen. So when first of all, I knew this and I had seen it in my work with survivors, but I could not say the truth about what had happened to me. I was frozen, and I never went to police. I'd made a couple of strategic disclosures here and there, confronted the perpetrators, but I never really told until one night, enough had happened in my life that I was like, it's time to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
And I was on this mailing list for a publisher who writes books for lawyers, Stony Creek Publishing. I was following them on LinkedIn, and I got a marketing email from Leslie Barrett, and I thought, why not? And I was like, hey, would you ever be interested in a book about, a survivor who was also a prosecutor of these cases? And next thing I know, they're like, yeah, actually, we would be interested. It was the first publisher I ever contacted. I did not have a manuscript, I had
we were
a
talking about writing it last time we were together.
Yeah. Well, and at that point I did have the publisher, but all I had was a little Google document when I wrote her, and they picked up the project and we interviewed collaborators, which is a must, a must. And when I met with y'all last February, the book was underway, and I ended up reformulating basically everything on my experience being back in the criminal sector for about 4 or 5 months. So, I'm super proud of this book. There's so many millions and millions, billions actually, of people, if you extrapolate the data, who need it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, how are you? So tell us a little bit about, the focus of the book, how you felt like you were ready to tell your story, how you hope that it'll help others. Just tell us a little bit about that.
The focus of the book is becoming unfrozen. That's my elevator speech. It didn't make it into the subtitle because it sounds bizarre a little bit.
Just thinking of the movie.
Yeah. Becoming unfrozen. I hadn't thought of that yet. That's funny. And I'm wearing blue like Elsa.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to do that on April 7th.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. So it's really like baby steps. It's what I had to do to finally get it out, because I know this now. I've been taking Dr. Bessel Vanderkolk's trauma certificate. It's a 7-month class. Every week there's a different. It's a lot of work actually, but what I suspected and sort of anecdotally knew to be true has been corroborated by science. So good thing I got it right in the book, because it turns out it's all true. And what people need are these tiny little baby steps so that they can just begin to say the truth about what's happened to them. Because what we know is that two things really start the healing process for someone who's survived sexual violence, and that is saying what happened, the truth about what happened, to a witness. And that is when reality reintegrates for that survivor, and they can actually release some of the allostatic load, it's called. That's the cumulative trauma that we all carry in our bodies, and really start healing. It's magical.
So in this process, and I know you've been sharing that the book is coming and getting the word out there, I can only imagine after once the book is out, the number of people reaching out to you that have suffered.
Yeah.
And so already have you had people reaching out, just starting the process?
I get messages from social media, and commenters saying, "Oh man, this is so needed," and sometimes people just say what happened to them in the comments, and even those little steps, and just validating it. And honestly, I could literally have a show where all I do is interview survivors every day. I could do 5 a day and never even scratch the surface, because the prevalence is mind-blowing.
Yeah. You know what I was just thinking when you were talking about becoming unfrozen and just taking those little baby steps? I think of it, the image that I have in my mind when you talk about that is, if somebody is frozen and something's melting, you just start getting those little cracks, like little cracks as you can start maybe moving, like just seeing that happen. By taking those little steps, you're kind of cracking through the ice so that you can tell that story. I mean, how can people get to that place to where they feel like they can actually come forward and be truthful about what happened, because it's so painful. You have it in your mind. You have to relive it all over again. Just going through a deposition with somebody that has to relive that, experience. I know with kind of secondary trauma, it's just watching it happen. So how do you encourage people to have the courage to be able to take that first step?
Well, I start at it's different for children. For children, if a child has disclosed or it's discovered that a child has been hurt, reporting must happen.
Okay.
That is not optional. We don't get to arbitrate facts when it comes to children. For adults, though, you don't have to go to the police. Like, you don't have to contact a lawyer to say your story. You don't have to do anything really except say it to yourself first. And that's the first step, is that realization of my life is not what I want it to be. I'm not happy, and not only am I not happy, I am miserable. And not only am I miserable, I might even be in despair. I need to reckon with the cause of this. And let's face it, it's probably what happened to me a long time ago. So what do I do next? Hopefully you'll get my book and you'll be able to take baby steps. There's a methodology, step by step, and then enlist a witness. And it's that moment where, you have someone there who's, ready to listen and not interrupt and not jam their trauma onto you, not gaslight you, just a person who's
just to listen,
open to witness, and who's willing to go there with you as you explain what happened. And that is really the goal, is doing this for yourself so you can move past it and heal.
Begin
to
heal.
Right.
Regardless of how long ago it was.
Yep. And actually live. Because survivors are not living. You're alive, but you're surviving. You're not, you have no joy for life on a daily basis. You want to die, but you're still alive.
Yeah. So you just got to keep on taking those steps. Yeah. Well, how has this focused your journey? You've gone through a lot in the last year.
Yeah.
Has writing this book really made you realize that you can do more things, that you can live life the way you want it? Has it been healing to you?
For sure. Oh, I'm a completely different person. You write off little things like losing your temper with your kids or not sleeping at night, taking benzodiazepines or whatever, whatever it is that you're using to cope, we write them off as though they're unrelated, but they're entirely related. It's all the same. And so clearing out all of that, it's a process. Your body is resetting, your nervous system's healing, stabilizing, grounding, and that just changes the ball game altogether. And so, basically, I've come to the point where I'm like, look, I've gone all in on basically a path that I believe can really heal humanity, on a large scale, and I'm not doing anything that's not that. Mm-hmm. So I'm just committed to, this message, and the message thankfully weaves its way into law practice in a lot of, interesting and important ways. And so, but if it's not this, I'm just not doing it.
So it's kind of like your North Star.
My North Star.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kind of guides you through. It tells you kind of where to go.
Exactly.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
so with the North Star, and it's weaved its way into the law practice, what are you doing? What are you doing in law?
Yeah, what a great question. I am available for certain types of contingency cases. I have a leader of the Boy Scout survivor movement who is, involved in the bankruptcy that is, reaching out to me, and, they were never given an opportunity to say what happened to them because the Boy Scouts filed for bankruptcy,
Right.
which entirely silenced, and there's
Everybody. Oh, wow.
82,000. No victim impact statements, no open bankruptcy courtroom with just a judge sitting there so maybe they could say nothing. They're like, you are silenced. And, so there's the opportunity to do institutional type cases like that I would do. I'm doing some criminal kind of advocacy, with some survivors who are in the criminal system and getting them through the grand jury. That's really more of a pro bono effort. What else am I doing? Workplace solutions. The most recent CDC data says that 37,910,000 women alone are survivors of workplace sexual harassment. And, we know from the EEOC that retaliation cases cost our businesses millions and billions of dollars. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to have a large scale impact through taking the discussion,
True.
not a fight necessarily,
Right.
into the workplaces. So I built out some consulting models that are being advertised on my website. And then what else? I started a podcast too. And so I'm hosting survivors to talk about this and creating space.
What is it called?
It's called Outcry Witness Unspoken.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. When is that launching? When is that starting?
The first couple episodes are out. They're crude, but they
Nice.
say just start where you are, right?
Right.
And so I will absolutely get bogged down in cameras and microphones and lights, but I ended up just going on the Zoom and talking about some data, and there I had a podcast episode. So what I would love to do, I would love to be on TV having survivors, like in a Barbara Walters type context. So I also am targeting a lot of my energy into speaking engagements and hopefully some paid media work.
Mm-hmm. Well, and JoDee, in this day and age now, I think everybody is really appreciative of just raw, forward-facing information. Like, they don't have to have all the lights and the bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. Yes, do we like that? But when something's good, when something's real and authentic, so you just not getting yourself all bogged down and just pushing forward with your podcast, like, that's amazing.
Thank you. It's just so. Think about it. If witnessing a person's pain can change that person's life,
Yes.
then why would you not do that?
Right.
It costs you nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be
But
like, wow.
Haven't you been doing that your whole career?
Of
though?
course.
You have.
That's
Isn't
why
that
I know it
strange?
works.
Yeah, I mean it
Yeah.
is. It's so interesting that your whole life and your whole passion is kind of propelled you to this point.
Yeah.
Because you have been the witness for so many people
Sure.
that have gone through so much trauma, and now you've gotten to the point where you can help people on such a grand scale, not just the client in front of you,
Right.
but people
Yeah.
across the country.
Yeah.
Across the world.
I'm basically trying to replicate myself. You know, cloning a bunch of, JoDee Neils who will sit there with people. And I did a lot of soul searching. You know, as a lawyer, I've really had to bear down and be like, what is it that I love about what I do? And at the end of the day, it came down to the moments where I'm talking to someone, because I feel invisible. I feel like I am just in this horror, which it is usually.
Yeah.
But for me, I just felt so weightless and, like transcendent. And I was like, that right there is such a relief. And it was a relief.
That's the sign.
Yeah, that's the sign.
That's the sign. Well, hang on, because we're going to have a part 2.
Yes. We can't let her go yet.
Yeah, we cannot. So if you are watching this one and you have comments, questions, or anything, you can comment below, or you can email us at hello@ladiesinlaw.com.
And before we close out, where can they reach you?
JoDeeNeil.com, neilnowlegal.com, and then Outcry Witness has a landing page, outcry-witness.com.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right,
thank you.
we're ready.